Hi, and welcome back to Gwen's Book Reviews, where you will find reviews on romance, action and adventure, mysteries, thrillers, and suspense. If you've written a book that falls into one of those genres and you'd like for me to review it, please do submit your request via my website. You can find the link in the description down below. And hey, while you're down there, don't forget to press that subscribe button. Now, let's head on to Sacramento, California, the setting for Holding Out for a Hero, the fourth in the Men in Uniform series by Cody Gary.
2 years after the death of his wife, Sergeant Blake Klein is still hurting. He isn't ready to date, but whenever he stops by his local diner and sees the friendly smile of his favorite waitress, he feels a spark of true happiness again. And when her life is unexpectedly threatened, Blake discovers his feelings for her might not be as platonic as he thought. Bookworm Hannah York has always been a hopeless romantic, preferring book boyfriends to blind dates, and she's been daydreaming about Blake since the moment he came into her diner. She's convinced they'll never be more than friends until Blake kisses her, and Weak in the Knees becomes more than just a line from her favorite romance novel. The closer Blake and Hannah get, however, the harder he fights to keep her at a distance. When their blossoming relationship takes a complicated turn, Blake will have to face his past or risk losing Hannah forever.
You can tell from that blurb that this is a romance. But before we jump straight to the review, there are 3 things I'd like to share with you. Number 1, my favorite character. Number 2, favorite dialogue. Number 3, a passage from the book. Nikki, Hannah's feisty best friend, is my favorite character. She has a lot of self-confidence without coming across as arrogant, and she's very loyal to Hannah. I also like the bit of comic relief that Nikki brings to a very touching story. It gives it good balance. Now, you don't get a whole lot of the little spitfire, but what you do get from her is memorable. And I have to tell you, I would love to read a book featuring her getting her happily ever after. If nothing else, I think it will be funny. Speaking of funny, my favorite dialogue just happens to be some of hers. Let's take a listen.
Oops, gotta go, sweets. There's a cute guy next to me at the light. I'm gonna see if he wants my number. Love you.
Okay, the first thing that popped into my head when I read that piece of dialogue is an Allstate commercial with Leslie Jones. Some of you may remember that actress from the 2016 remake of Ghostbusters. Okay, so in this commercial, she's very brazen in a funny way. And so at the end, she drives up next to this guy and she just looks over at him, and her voice is kind of deep and she's like, "You want my number?" And she winks at him. And it's this look of horror that comes over his face. And every single time I've seen that, I've just cracked up laughing. And that's what happened when I read this piece of dialogue. That commercial just popped in my head. So if any of you have seen that commercial, you know what I'm talking about. So I just have to tell you, anything that makes me laugh or reminds me of something that makes me laugh is all right with me. Let's move on to a passage from the book.
She pushed out the door and out of sight before he could tell her he didn't kiss other women like that, that she was the first since Jenny. But then she might read more into that than he intended. Just let her go. It's better this way. What the hell did you do? Blake caught Bess standing in the doorway looking incredulous. I kissed her. And your breath was rancid?
Okay, there's another bit of comic relief. This book does that really well. You know, like I said, it's a very touching story, but every once in a while something is thrown in there to kind of, ease the tension a little bit. So here's what's happening. Blake is about 27 years old, and he's been a widower for about 2 years at the start of the book. So his wife, Jenny, she was his high school sweetheart and the only woman he's ever been with, and she's murdered. And he, of course, is struggling with that. Who wouldn't, right? He's having a really, really hard time moving on and accepting that she's gone and accepting the events that led up to her death, which leaves him feeling really, really guilty. I won't tell you what those events are because I don't want to ruin it for you, but it's a big struggle for him. So here comes Hannah. She is a waitress at a restaurant, a cafe rather, where he goes to have breakfast every morning. So at the start of the book, they've already had like a 10-month friendship. They don't really hang out outside, of the diner or anything, but he talks to her regularly. She doesn't know what's going on with him. She doesn't know his history, and she's developed a crush on him. But with her not knowing, that he was married, let alone that his wife died, she's not sure about, why he doesn't make a move. And she doesn't really blame herself and say, maybe he doesn't like me. She doesn't know what's going on, so it kind of keeps things moving at a slow pace. Well, as the story progresses, he is really starting to like her, but he's struggling with feeling guilty, like he's cheating on his wife or feeling guilty about moving on. He thinks it's been too soon. I get all of that. I totally get it. And so I was really rooting for these two to finally make their connection. Hannah is described as shy. You know, I didn't really take her character to be shy. She gets a little shy around him because she likes him and she doesn't know where she stands with him. But she's not shy in terms of like she would let anybody run over her. She'll say what she needs to say, speak her mind, but in a very, very sweet way. She's not forceful either. So now, well, back to Blake. Blake can kind of have a temper and he kind of blows up, not in a dangerous, you know, physical kind of way, but he loses his temper sometimes because he's so frustrated. Once again, I totally get that. One thing that I wish had been a little different about Blake is most of his progress was forced on him. Instead of him saying, okay, you know, I want to be better, I want to feel better and move on with my life, he kind of wallowed. And I don't mean that to disrespect to anybody who's lost a spouse, but in this book, I took it as he preferred to wallow and make excuses to not get better than to actually make an attempt to get better. And the reason that was a turnoff is I prefer strong characters who, okay, they go through their moments and then they decide for themselves, you know, I want to get better and I'm going to make that move. What Blake does in this book, he's kind of forced to do it. He's issued an ultimatum from the director of the Alpha Dog program, which is his job. He's also a soldier, so they were threatening to transfer him. They're like, look, we've offered you therapy, you refuse to take it. You know, if you don't do something, we're going to have to do something different. We're going to disconnect you from the program. That would really hurt him because other than Hannah, it's his job that he finds some kind of solace in. So they pretty much forced his hand. Yes, he did it and it turned out great, but that was a little bit of a downside to me is, you know, his refusal to try to be better. Hannah was very patient. At some point I was like, okay, if he keeps with the ping pong back and forth, you know, she's going to deserve someone better. Of course, we knew that wasn't going to happen because it's a romance, and these two had to end up together. And I was glad they did. Don't get me wrong, but that was a little bit of a downside to the book for me was Blake's refusal to just try. You know, I didn't like that he had to be forced. But nonetheless, it's a very good read. Probably sounds funny coming from me after what I just said, but it is. It is. Please keep in mind that reviews are subjective, and just because something doesn't work for me, that doesn't mean it won't work for you. I love the friends. I love not just Nikki, but the other three gentlemen who are the heroes in the 3 previous books in the series are all there. And, you know, with their women that they matched up with in the previous books. So I love that camaraderie and that friendship and that loyalty there. So there's a lot of good to this book, and I do recommend that you read it. That brings us now to the review part. For those of you who are not aware, my review system is different. Where you're used to stars, I actually do cups of coffee, and instead of wanting more, you want less. So the gist behind it is how many cups of coffee did I have to drink to get through the book. And so in essence, 0 cups of coffee is equivalent to 5 stars. 1 cup of coffee, is equivalent to 4 stars. You get the gist, and so on and so forth. So the question is, how many cups of coffee did I have to drink to get through Holding Out for a Hero? Let's see. That's right, I drank 1 cup of coffee. Like I said, I kind of started getting a little tired of Blake's back and forth, and indecisive behavior, but it was still a good book. I still recommend it. Once again, don't forget that 1 cup of coffee is equivalent to 4 stars, so that's still a really good rating. And I still advise that you guys read the book. One more quick thing I like to point out is there are sex scenes in this book. For those of you who have a problem with that, or if you were thinking of recommending this to someone under 18, I just want to make you aware there are some sex scenes in the book. So just wanted to throw that out there. With that being said, if you would like to connect with the author or buy the book, there are some links in the description down below. If you decide to read the book, please do come back and tell us what you think about it. I'd love to discuss it with you. Until then, that ends today's review. Thank you all for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, happy reading.